The security camera footage showed movement at 11:47 p.m., behind the 8-car garage where no one belonged after dark. Robert Chen sat in his home office reviewing the day's market reports when the alert buzzed his phone. He almost ignored it, probably a deer, maybe a raccoon, but something made him switch to the live feed. A small figure crouched beside his vintage Aston Martin, tools spread across the concrete, working with the kind of focus that didn't belong to a thief. The boy couldn't have been more than 16. Thin arms, oversized jacket, movements quick and purposeful. Robert's jaw tightened. His driver's son, the one who rode to school in the passenger seat each morning, silent as stone, staring out the window while his father navigated the morning traffic. The one teachers mentioned at parent conferences with concern in their voices and frustration in their eyes. Never speaks. Never participates. Just sits there. And now he was crouched beside a $250,000 vehicle at midnight, holding tools that looked older than he was. Robert stood. The house stretched vast and quiet around him, 40 rooms of marble and mahogany, artwork that cost more than most people earned in lifetimes. His bare feet made no sound on the heated floors as he moved through hallways designed to impress, to establish, to remind everyone who entered exactly how far he'd climbed from the Brooklyn apartment where he'd grown up sharing a bedroom with 3 brothers. He'd built an empire from nothing, taught himself code in public libraries, slept in his first office. Now he employed 300 people and owned buildings in 7 cities. He'd owned every inch of this space. The boy hadn't. Robert grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and stepped into the night air. September in Connecticut carried the first whisper of autumn, that smell of leaves beginning their slow surrender. Motion sensor lights blazed to life as he crossed the patio, illuminating the pool, the tennis courts, the greenhouse where his wife grew orchids that cost thousands per bloom. Everything maintained. Everything perfect. Everything exactly as it should be. The garage sat separate from the main house, a structure built to showcase rather than shelter. Climate controlled. Humidity regulated. Each vehicle positioned like sculpture, lit from below by LED strips that cost more than the boy's father probably earned in a month. Robert approached from the side, keeping to shadows, watching. The kid worked like he'd done this 1,000 times. No hesitation. No fumbling. His hands moved with the efficiency of someone who understood not just what to do, but why. He had the Aston Martin's engine compartment open, a work light clipped to the hood, and he was elbow-deep in components that most mechanics wouldn't touch without computer diagnostics and $300 an hour labor rates. Robert's mouth went dry. The car had been making a noise. Subtle. A whisper of something not quite right that the dealership couldn't diagnose. Probably just needs to break in more, they'd said. These engines are temperamental. He'd brought it in twice. They'd charged him twice. The sound persisted. The boy tightened something with a wrench, so worn the chrome had flaked away to bare metal. He paused. Listened. Adjusted. The kind of attention that couldn't be taught, only earned through hours and hours of practice that left calluses on palms and oil under fingernails that never quite came clean. Robert stepped forward. The flashlight beam caught the boy full in the face. The kid froze. Absolute stillness, like a rabbit that knows the Hulk circles overhead. His eyes went wide, not just startled, but terrified. The kind of fear that comes from knowing exactly how much you have to lose. The wrench slipped from his fingers, clattering against concrete with a sound that seemed to echo forever in the quiet night. "What," Robert said slowly, "do you think you're doing?" The boy's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His hands trembled as he lowered them slowly, deliberately, like someone trying to prove they're not a threat. Grease stained his jacket sleeves. His jeans had holes at the knees, not fashion, but wear. His sneakers looked 2 sizes too big, probably hammer-downs, the kind you grow into rather than out of. Robert stepped closer. "Do you have any idea what that car is worth?" His voice came out harder than he intended, sharp with the anger of violated trust. "Your father works for me. I let you ride in my vehicles every morning. And this is how you repay that." Still nothing. The boy's eyes tracked to the tools scattered on the ground, then back to Robert's face. His throat worked like he was trying to swallow around something lodged there. His shoulders hunched inward, making himself smaller, less threatening, less visible. "I asked you a question." Robert's patience, never abundant, evaporated completely. "Can you speak?" Or are you going to just stand there like you do in every classroom, wasting everyone's time? The boy flinched. Actually flinched, like he'd been struck. And Robert felt it. That sick twist in his gut that came from knowing he'd hit harder than intended, gone for blood when a warning would have sufficed. But the anger felt good, felt righteous, felt like the protection of everything he'd built against people who would take without asking, touch without permission, assume without earning. Stories like this one spread through neighborhoods quickly, shared by those who understood that trust, once broken, could never be fully repaired. The morning school runs would be watched, re-watched, discussed by parents from every suburb, every income bracket, every background. People would talk about security and safety and the importance of boundaries. They would check their own surveillance footage, seeking proof that the world still contained clear lines between right and wrong, between earned and stolen, between those who belonged and those who didn't. "I want an answer," Robert said. "Now. Why were you touching my car?" The boy's hands curled into fists at his sides. His jaw clenched. And then, slowly, so slowly it seemed to take years, he reached into his jacket pocket. Robert's muscles tensed, irrational flash of fear, stupid. The kid was 90 pounds soaking wet, but what emerged wasn't a weapon. It was a piece of paper, folded so many times the creases had worn soft. The boy held it out like an offering, like a white flag, like the only explanation he could manage. Robert took it, unfolded it carefully, aware that his hands were steady while the boy's still shook. The paper felt thin, fragile, old. The handwriting that covered it was careful, precise. The letters formed by someone who'd learned English as a second language and never quite mastered the casual flow of native speakers. "Asterisk to my son," asterisk it began. Asterisk by the time you read this, I will be gone. Asterisk. Robert's chest tightened. Asterisk I am not educated man. I drive cars. I clean. I do work nobody see. But I know things. I know engines. My father taught me in old country, before war, before everything changed. He was best mechanic in 3 villages. He could hear what was wrong just by listening. He taught me same. Asterisk. Asterisk I teach you. Every night, after you sleep, I practice. I learn new engines, new systems. American cars different than home, but principle same. Metal. Combustion. Physics don't change with borders. Asterisk. Asterisk you are smart boy. Smarter than me. You understand things I never could. But you are quiet. Too quiet. Teachers say you don't talk. I know why. I see it. You ashamed. Ashamed of father who drives. Ashamed of apartment. Ashamed of clothes from donation box. Ashamed of accent in your mouth that you hide by saying nothing. Asterisk. Asterisk don't be ashamed. Asterisk. Asterisk skill is skill. Knowledge is knowledge. Rich man's engine brake same as poor man's. Maybe you fix it better because you had to learn with old tools, bad lighting, no computer telling you answer. Maybe you understand because you earned it, not bought it. Asterisk. Asterisk I am sick. Doctor says months, not years. I don't tell your mother. Not yet. But I tell you this, you have gift. Use it. Don't hide. World tries to make people like us invisible. Don't help them. Asterisk. Asterisk these tools are yours. They were my father's. Now yours. They are not fancy. They work. Asterisk. Asterisk that is enough. Asterisk. Asterisk be proud of what you can do. It matters more than where you come from. Asterisk. The letter wasn't signed. Didn't need to be. Robert looked up. The boy stood exactly as before, trembling slightly, waiting for judgment. Behind him, the Aston Martin sat with its hood still open. The problem Robert had paid thousands to fix and couldn't, now probably solved by a kid with 50-year-old wrenches and knowledge passed down through generations like an inheritance worth more than money. When did he die? Robert asked quietly. The boy's eyes filled. His lips pressed together. But he held up 4 fingers. 4 months ago. 4 months of sitting silent in classrooms. 4 months of riding to school without speaking. 4 months of teachers calling him difficult, unmotivated, troubled. 4 months of carrying grief so heavy it stole his voice. 4 months of practicing his father's gift in the middle of the night, the only time he felt close to the man who'd taught him that skill mattered more than shame. Robert folded the letter carefully, handed it back. Show me what you did. The boy hesitated for 3 full seconds before moving. He walked to the car like someone approaching something sacred, something borrowed that must be returned exactly as found. His hands still shook, but they steadied the moment they touched metal. He pointed to a component Robert didn't recognize, something nestled deep in the engine compartment that would have required removing half a dozen other parts just to access. The boy's finger traced a line along a rubber seal. Then he made a gesture, pressing his palms together and twisting, showing how the seal had rotated slightly, creating a gap smaller than a dime. He mimicked the sound, that whisper Robert had been hearing. The kid's impression was perfect. He diagnosed it by listening. Robert leaned closer. The seal looked fine to the naked eye. But when the boy shone his work light at an angle, the gap became visible. Barely. The kind of thing you'd miss unless you knew exactly what to look for, unless you'd spent years learning to see what others couldn't. The dealership looked at this twice, Robert said. The boy nodded. His expression said, I know. His hands said, they looked but didn't see. He picked up his ancient wrench, fitted it around a bolt that looked impossible to reach, and with one smooth motion, tightened the seal back into position. The movement was economical, precise, the product of practice that started in childhood. Muscle memory built in a garage somewhere, under the guidance of a father who'd learned from his own father, knowledge flowing down through time like water finding its path. The boy stepped back, gestured to Robert, start it. Robert climbed into the driver's seat. The leather still smelled new, that expensive scent of hand-stitch perfection. He pressed the ignition. The engine purred to life with the sound of perfectly tuned machinery, 12 cylinders firing in sequence, and the whisper, that annoying, persistent, $3,000 mystery, was gone. Completely silent except for the deep throb of 300 horsepower waiting to be unleashed. Robert sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, listening to perfection achieved by a kid with tools older than he was. The dealership had charged him $900 for the first diagnostic, $1,200 for the second. Parts they'd replaced unnecessarily, labor they'd billed at rates that assumed expertise they didn't possess. And they'd never fixed it because they'd never actually understood it. This kid had fixed it in 20 minutes. Robert killed the engine. Stepped out. The boy was already gathering his tools, moving with quiet efficiency, trying to disappear now that the job was done. He knelt on the concrete, organizing wrenches by size, setting them into a canvas roll that had been mended so many times the original fabric was barely visible beneath the patches. Stop, Robert said. The boy froze mid-motion. How did you know? Robert asked. The noise. How did you diagnose it? The kid looked at him, then at the car, then back. He couldn't explain in words, so he did it in motion. He touched his ear, pointed to the engine, made a gesture like waves, showing sound patterns, frequencies, the way noise travels through metal and air. He showed how he'd listened not just to the sound but to where it came from, how it changed with temperature, with RPM, with load. His hands painted a picture of understanding built on years of attention, of practice, of caring enough to learn the language machines speak to those patient enough to hear. Robert's phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. * need me to call police? *. He'd forgotten about the cameras. His security team watched everything. So the boy working. So Robert confront him. They were waiting for instructions on how to handle the trespasser, the threat, the violation of property and trust. Robert typed back, * stand down. False alarm, .. He pocketed the phone and studied the boy in front of him. 16 years old. Underfed. Wearing his grief like a coat too heavy for his frame. Smart enough to fix problems that stumped professionals. Talented enough to have inherited a gift worth more than most college degrees. And silent in every classroom because shame had stolen his voice more thoroughly than fear ever could. Your father was right, Robert said quietly. You have a gift. The boy's eyes widened. Not with pride, with something closer to pain. Like hearing it from someone other than his father made the loss more real, made the absence more permanent. His throat worked again, that swallowing motion that preceded words that wouldn't come. I know about silence, Robert continued. I know about being ashamed of where you come from. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with 5 people. We shared clothes. Shared meals. My father cleaned office buildings at night. People looked through him like he was furniture. I learned early that being invisible felt safer than being seen. The boy watched him with absolute focus. I taught myself to code because books were free at the library and computers didn't care what I was wearing. I built my first company because no one would hire me, not with my background, not with my accent, not with a state school degree that didn't open any doors. And I swore that if I ever made it, I'd never be ashamed again. Robert paused. But you know what I learned? The shame doesn't go away just because the bank account grows. It changes shape. It hides. But it's still there, waiting to tell you that you don't deserve what you've earned, that someone will figure out you don't belong, that you're still that kid from Brooklyn who couldn't afford lunch. The boy's eyes glistened. Your father taught you something real, Robert said. Something that can't be bought or faked. He gave you a skill that will matter anywhere, anytime, for your entire life. That's worth more than anything in this garage. More than this house. More than every dollar I've ever made. The boy's chest itched. He pressed his lips together hard, fighting tears, fighting the grief that had been silent for 4 months, because crying meant admitting the loss was real and permanent and would never be fixed no matter how many engines he repaired. Robert made a decision. Tomorrow after school, come find me. I want to make you an offer. The boy's head snapped up. Fear flickered across his face, the fear of hoping for something, of wanting something, of believing that maybe the world contained more than loss and shame and silence. I'm not going to call your father about this, Robert said. But I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Something I think you'll be good at. Something that will put that gift to use. The boy nodded slowly. Once. Agreement without understanding. Now go home, Robert said. Get some sleep. And tomorrow, we'll talk. The kid gathered his tools with hands that no longer trembled. He rolled them carefully in the canvas, tied the worn strings, and tucked the bundle under his arm. He started to walk away, then stopped, turned back, and for the first time, his mouth opened and sound emerged. Thank you. The words came out rough, unpracticed, the first he'd spoken in months. His accent was there, the same accent his father had carried, the mark of somewhere else that he'd been hiding by staying silent. Thank you for reading it. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness beyond the security lights, a small figure carrying tools worth more than their weight in metal, walking home to an apartment where his father's absence filled every room. Robert stood alone in his garage, surrounded by vehicles worth millions, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the recognition of himself in someone else. The memory of what it felt like to be young and talented and terrified that the world would never let you prove it. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to his executive assistant, *schedule meeting tomorrow, 4 p.m. Also, I need information on scholarships for automotive engineering. Full ride. Best programs in the country. Don't ask questions yet. Just compile the list. The response came back immediately. Done. Anything else? Robert looked at his Aston Martin. Finally silent. Finally perfect. Fixed by a boy who'd learned from his father who'd learned from his own father, knowledge passing through generations like a torch that never went out no matter how dark the night became. Yes, he typed. Find out what happened to the boy's father. Medical records. How he died. What bills were left behind. I want everything. He needed to understand the full shape of the story. Needed to know what had been taken from this kid and what might still be salvaged. Needed to see if there was a way to honor a father's final gift by making sure his son could use it without shame, without silence, without hiding the very thing that made him extraordinary. The garage lights hummed overhead. Expensive cars sat in perfect rows. And Robert Chen, who'd built an empire from nothing, stood in the space between his past and present, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with having power and knowing what it meant to have none. Tomorrow would be important. Tonight, a boy slept with his father's tools under his bed, and for the first time in 4 months, maybe the silence felt a little less heavy. Robert spent the morning in back-to-back meetings that required his full attention and received half of it. His mind kept drifting to the file his assistant had compiled overnight. Medical records. Death certificate. Outstanding bills that painted a picture of a family trying to survive a father's cancer treatment on a driver's salary with insurance that covered almost nothing. The total came to just over $80,000. medical debt that would follow the family for years, crushing credit, preventing loans, ensuring that poverty remained a trap rather than a circumstance. The mother worked 2 jobs, daycare center during the day, cleaning offices at night. The same work her husband had done. The same invisibility. Robert's 4 o'clock meeting was with the board of his newest acquisition. He rescheduled it without explanation. At 3:45, he texted the boy's father, *, send your son to my office when you pick him up from school. I have a proposition, *. The response took 3 minutes, *, sir. If this is about last night, I apologize. He meant no harm. Please don't, *. It's not a punishment, *, Robert interrupted. *, it's an opportunity. Just send him up, *. At 4:15, his assistant knocked. There's a young man here to see you. He seems nervous. Robert stood from behind the mahogany desk that had cost more than most people's cars. Send him in. The boy entered like he was walking into an execution chamber. He'd changed clothes, different jacket, but still worn. His hair was combed. His hands were scrubbed clean, but the oil stains remained under his nails, permanent ink that marked him as someone who worked with his hands. He stood in the doorway of an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, surrounded by artwork and achievements and evidence of success that must have felt like a foreign language he'd never learned to speak. Sit, Robert said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. The boy sat today, perched, really, on the edge like he might need to run. I'm going to make this simple, Robert began. I run 17 companies. I have 6 cars at home and 12 more at various properties. I have boats. I have a plane. And every single one of them needs maintenance. Every single one of them breaks down or makes strange noises or develops problems that dealerships can't fix because they are following computer printouts instead of understanding principles. The boy listened with complete focus. I'm going to hire you, Robert said. Part-time while you're in school. Weekends. Evenings when you're available. You'll maintain everything I own. You'll diagnose problems. You'll fix what's broken. And you'll do it for $40 an hour. The boy's eyes went wide. $40 an hour was more than his father had made, more than his mother made at both jobs combined. It was impossible money for a 16-year-old with no official experience and a social security number that marked him as a first-generation immigrant. But there's a condition, Robert continued. Actually, several conditions. The boy tensed. First, you're going to talk. In school. In class. To teachers. You're going to participate. You're going to raise your hand. You're going to ask questions. I'm going to check with your father, and he's going to check with your teachers, and if I hear that you're still sitting silent, the job ends. The boy's mouth opened. Closed. He looked terrified. Second, you're going to maintain AB average. All classes. Not just the ones you like. Because being good with your hands doesn't excuse being ignorant about everything else. Your father knew that. It's why he wanted you to stay in school even when money was tight. The boy nodded slowly. Third, you're going to let me pay off your father's medical debt. The kid's face went white. He started shaking his head violently, hands coming up in protest, mouth forming the word no over and over without sound. It's not charity, Robert said firmly. It's an investment. You can't learn if you're drowning. You can't focus if you're watching your mother work herself to death. You can't develop your gift if you're spending every night worried about bills instead of practicing your craft. So I'm removing the obstacle. Consider it a signing bonus. The boy's eyes filled with tears. His hands trembled in his lap. And fourth, Robert said quietly, you're going to college. Full scholarship. I've got a list of programs, MIT, Stanford, Caltech. Places with the best automotive engineering departments in the world. You'll apply to all of them. You'll get in because you're brilliant. And you'll go because that's what your father wanted even if he never said it out loud. The tears spilled over. The boy tried to wipe them away quickly, embarrassed, but they kept coming. For months of grief and fear and shame and exhaustion, all breaking at once in an office overlooking a city that had never made space for people like him. Why? The word came out choked. Why would you do this? Robert stood, walked to the window, looked down at the streets 40 stories below where people moved like ants, everyone with their own story, their own struggles, their own gift that might never be recognized because no one bothered to look. Because 20 years ago, I was you, he said. Different details. Same shame. Same silence. I got lucky. Someone took a chance on me. Gave me a job I wasn't qualified for because they saw something I couldn't see in myself. And I swore that if I ever had the chance, I'd do the same. He turned back to face the boy. Your father left you 2 things. His tools and his knowledge. But there's a third thing he left you that I don't think you've figured out yet. The boy waited. He left you his dignity. His refusal to be ashamed of honest work. His understanding that skill matters more than status. His certainty that you were worth every sacrifice he made. That's the real inheritance. And you dishonor it every time you sit silent in a classroom because you're afraid people will judge your accent or your clothes or where you come from. Robert moved back to his desk. Pulled out a contract he'd had legal draw up that morning. This is a 1-year employment agreement. Renewable each year until you graduate high school. After that, we'll talk about summer internships while you're in college. Real engineering work. Not just maintenance. Design. Innovation. Building things that don't exist yet. He slid the contract across the desk. Read it carefully. Show it to your mother. If you have questions, ask. If you want a lawyer to review it, I'll pay for that too. But I need an answer by Friday. The boy picked up the contract with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the first page. The second. The salary terms. The benefits, health insurance, educational stipend, performance bonuses. The clause about the medical debt, spelled out in legal language that made it binding and non-negotiable. I don't understand, the boy whispered. I broke into your property. I touched your car without permission. Why aren't you angry? I was angry, Robert admitted. For about 5 minutes. Then I read your father's letter. And I realized you weren't stealing. You were practicing. You were honoring what he taught you. You were doing exactly what he asked, using your gift, refusing to hide, being proud of what you can do. He sat back down. Besides, you fixed something professionals couldn't. You proved you're worth $40 an hour before I even made the offer. Now you just have to prove you're worth everything else I'm going to invest. The boy stared at the contract like it might dissolve if he looked away. My father, he would tell me not to accept charity. It's not charity, Robert repeated. It's a trade. I get a brilliant mechanic who actually understands engines instead of just reading diagnostic codes. You get a chance to develop your skills, earn real money, and prepare for a future your father died making possible. Everyone wins. The boy's hands tightened on the paper. If I do this, if I talk in class, people will hear my accent. They'll know we're not from here. They'll know you're smart, Robert interrupted. They'll know you have ideas. They'll know you exist. And some of them will judge you anyway because that's what frightened people do. But you know what? Their judgment doesn't fix cars. Their judgment doesn't understand combustion engines or electrical systems or any of the 1,000 things you already know. Their judgment is noise. Your skill is signal. The boy wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I don't know if I can. You can, Robert said with certainty. You spoke last night. You spoke today. It gets easier every time. And eventually, you'll realize that your voice matters just as much as anyone else's. More? Sometimes, because you've earned your knowledge instead of inheriting it. The office fell quiet. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. Inside, a boy held his future in his hands and tried to believe it was real. Take it home, Robert said gently. Talk to your mother. Think about what your father would say. Not about the charity part, about the opportunity part. About using your gift. About refusing to hide. The boy stood slowly, folded the contract carefully, tucked it inside his jacket like it was something precious. He started toward the door, then stopped. Mr. Chen. His voice was stronger now, clearer. Thank you for reading the letter. Most people, they wouldn't have. Most people don't know what they are looking at, Robert said. I did. And you're welcome. The boy left. Robert sat alone in his office, surrounded by success that suddenly felt less important than the chance to share it with someone who understood what it meant to build something from nothing, to inherit knowledge instead of money, to carry a father's final gift into a future that father would never see. His phone buzzed. A text from the boy's father. Sir, his crying. Did something bad happen? Robert smiled. No. He typed back. Something good. Very good. Let him tell you. And plan to come see me Monday morning. We need to discuss your position too. I think you worth more than I've been paying. Because if the son was this talented, the father had been more than just a driver. He'd been a teacher, a mentor, someone who'd passed on knowledge worth more than any salary could compensate. And Robert Chen, who understood the value of skill over status, who remembered what it meant to be invisible, was going to make sure that neither father nor son remained hidden any longer. The city gleamed below. Evening approached, and somewhere in an apartment across town, a family gathered around a contract that promised not just money, but recognition. Not just opportunity, but dignity. The kind of dignity that comes from being seen for what you can do rather than judged for where you come from. The kind that lasts. 3 months passed faster than seemed possible. The boy, whose name was Alex, Robert had learned on his first day of work, showed up every Saturday morning at 8 sharp. He worked with quiet intensity, maintaining vehicles worth more than some houses, diagnosing problems with the kind of instinct that only came from years of focused practice. He never complained, never cut corners, never treated anything as beneath his attention. And he talked. Not at first. Those first few weeks, he still moved through the world like someone trying not to be noticed. But Robert had made it clear, participation in school wasn't optional. So Alex spoke in class, raised his hand, asked questions that revealed he'd been paying attention all along, absorbing everything despite his silence, understanding more than teachers had given him credit for. The accent was there, the marks of somewhere else that some students noticed, some ignored, some mocked. But something shifted when people realized he could argue about physics principles with the precision of someone who'd applied them in practice, who understood combustion theory because he'd tuned engines that put it into action. Respect came slowly, then all at once. Robert tracked the progress through weekly check-ins with Alex's father, who'd been promoted to head of household staff, a position that came with a real salary, benefits, and the kind of security that let a family breathe instead of just survive. The man cried when Robert told him the medical debt had been paid in full. Tried to argue that it was too much, too generous, too complicated to accept. It's done, Robert had said simply. Accept it with grace. Teach your son that sometimes good things happen not because you deserve them less than others, but because the world occasionally works the way it should. Now, on a Saturday morning in late November, Robert stood in his garage watching Alex diagnose a problem with his Mercedes. The kid had his head under the hood, listening to the engine with that total focus that made him seem years older than 16. His hands moved with confidence that hadn't been there 3 months ago. Not because his skill had grown, it hadn't needed to, but because his belief in himself had finally caught up to his ability. It's the alternator, Alex said without looking up. Bearings wearing out. You'll have another month before it fails completely, but you'll want to replace it now, before it damages the belt. How much will the dealership charge me? Robert asked. Alex straightened, wiped his hands on a rag. Parts and labor? Probably $1,500. Maybe $2,000 depending on who you get. And if you do it? $200 for the part. 2 hours of work. Alex met his eyes steadily. But you're not paying me to maintain your personal vehicles anymore. That was the deal. I'm here to learn, not just a service. Robert smiled. The kid had internalized the lesson. Know your worth, but also know when to push back against being used. Fair enough. But I still want you to fix it. Call it practice. Alex nodded. Made a note on his phone. I'll order the part Monday. Have it installed next weekend. How's school? Good. Alex's default answer, but there was substance behind it now. Mrs. Patterson asked me to tutor 2 other kids in physics. Said I explain concepts better than she does. Because you've applied them. Because I actually understand why the formulas matter instead of just memorizing them. Alex closed the hood gently. It's different when you've used something to solve a real problem. Math stops being abstract. Robert leaned against his workbench. MIT sent their acceptance package yet? Alex's face shifted. Excitement mixed with something heavier. Yeah. Last week. And full scholarship. Room and board. Everything. Alex paused. Stanford sent theirs too. Caltech called yesterday. That's excellent news. It is. But Alex didn't sound fully convinced. His eyes tracked to the garage floor. Mom's worried. Says Boston is too far. Says I should stay local. Go to community college first. Make sure I'm ready. What do you think? I think. Alex hesitated. I think I'm scared. MIT is where the best students go. Kids who've been preparing their whole lives. Who've had private tutors and expensive equipment and parents who went to college. I'll be the guy who learned to fix cars in his dead father's garage. Robert let the silence stretch. Let Alex hear his own fears spoken aloud so he could examine it. You know what they teach at MIT? Robert finally asked. Alex shook his head. Theory. Beautiful, elegant theory that explains how things work on paper. But you know what they don't teach? How to diagnose a problem when the computer says everything's fine, but the engine still makes noise. How to fix something with old tools and limited resources. How to understand a system so completely that you can hear what's wrong before anyone else notices. That's what you bring. That's what makes you different. Different like valuable or different like doesn't belong? Both, Robert said honestly. You'll struggle with some things. The theoretical math that kids who've had calculus since middle school breeze through. The assumed knowledge that everyone else seems to have. The cultural references and inside jokes of people who grew up with different privileges. It will be hard. Alex's shoulders hunched slightly. But you'll also do things they can't, Robert continued. You'll solve practical problems they can't visualize. You'll understand failure modes because you've diagnosed them. You'll work harder because you know what it costs when you don't. And eventually, they'll come to you for help. Because theory without practice is just philosophy. Dad used to say something like that, Alex said quietly. He'd tell me that anyone can read a manual. Understanding comes from doing. He was right. Robert pushed off the workbench. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led Alex through the garage, past the collection of vehicles, into the back room where he kept his real treasures, not cars, but projects. Half-finished prototypes of automated systems he'd been developing. Electric vehicle components. Battery technology research. This is what I actually work on, Robert said. The companies pay for my life. This is what matters to me. Figuring out how to make technology better, cleaner, more efficient. How to solve problems that everyone says are impossible. Alex's eyes widened as he took in the equipment, the testing rigs, the computer models displayed on multiple screens. I need engineers who understand practical applications, Robert continued. People who can look at a theory and say that won't work because metal fatigue, or that's inefficient because heat dissipation. I need people who've gotten their hands dirty. Who've failed. Who've fixed their mistakes. He turned to face Alex directly. I'm offering you a summer internship. After your freshman year, you'll work here, on these projects. You'll learn more than 40 an hour. You'll learn things they don't teach in classrooms. And you'll build a portfolio that will matter when you graduate. Alex stared at the projects like they were treasure maps. Why me? Because your father taught you something rare, how to see what others miss. How to understand systems from the inside out. How to value skill over status. And because I know what it means to be the kid from nowhere who doesn't think he belongs. I need you to believe me when I tell you, you belong anywhere your ability can take you. Alex's throat worked. I don't want to let him down. Then don't, Robert said simply. Honor his sacrifice. Use the gift he gave you. Go to MIT. Study until your eyes hurt. Learn everything they'll teach you. Then come back here and help me build things that matter. That's how you honor him. Not by playing small. Not by staying safe. By being exactly as brilliant as he knew you were. The workshop hummed with equipment. Screens displayed data that represented months of research, years of investment, a lifetime of refusing to accept that better wasn't possible. Okay, Alex whispered. I'll go. Good, Robert said. Now help me figure out why this battery cell keeps overheating. I've been stuck on it for 3 weeks. They worked until evening, mentor and student, both from nowhere, both refusing to let origin define destination. The alternator could wait. The real education, the kind that came from hands-on problem solving, from trying and failing and trying again, that couldn't. Outside, winter approached. Inside, the future took shape one solved problem at a time, built by people who understood that dignity came not from where you started, but from how hard you were willing to work to become who you were meant to be. Robert stood at the back of the MIT graduation ceremony, watching Alex cross the stage to accept his diploma. 4 years had passed since that midnight encounter in the garage. 4 years of late-night phone calls when problem sets felt impossible. 4 years of summer internships that turned into actual research positions. 4 years of watching a kid who'd once hidden his voice become someone who presented papers at conferences, who argued with professors, who filed patent applications for innovations that emerged from understanding both theory and practice. The young man on stage bore little resemblance to the terrified boyhood frozen in flashlight beams. Alex stood tall now, confident in a way that came from proven competence rather than artificial bravado. His accent remained. He'd stopped trying to hide it sophomore year, realizing it marked him as someone with perspective others lacked rather than as someone who didn't belong. The dean announced his name with honors that made Robert's chest tighten. Summa cum laude, department awards, recognition for research that bridged theoretical engineering and practical application. Alex had done exactly what Robert predicted. Struggled with some things, excelled at others, eventually became the person other students sought out when textbook solutions didn't match real-world problems. After the ceremony, Robert found Alex surrounded by family. His mother, who'd aged less in the past 4 years than in the 4 before that, no longer working double shifts, no longer drowning in debt. His younger sister, now 13, already showing signs of the same quiet brilliance her brother possessed. And beside them, Robert's own wife, who'd taken Alex's mother under wing, helped her navigate systems designed to be confusing, connected her with resources and opportunities that transformed struggle into stability. Mr. Chen, Alex said, breaking away from the crowd. His handshake was firm now, no hesitation. Thank you for coming. I wouldn't have missed it. Robert gestured to the diploma. 4 years went fast. And slow, Alex admitted. There were nights I almost called you to say I was coming home, that I wasn't good enough, that everyone else was smarter. But you didn't. No, Alex smiled. Because you'd have told me that struggling means you're learning. That easy means you're not being challenged enough. That the goal isn't to be the smartest person in the room, it's to become smarter than you were yesterday. I said all that. Multiple times. Usually around 2 in the morning when I was panicking about exams. Robert laughed. Well, it worked. What's next? Alex's expression shifted to something more serious. I got offers. Google, Tesla, BMW's research division. All good money. All interesting work. But I want to come work for you. Alex met his eyes steadily. If the offer's still open. I know 4 years is a long time. Plans change. Robert had been preparing for this moment. Had the contract ready. Had been watching Alex's progress specifically to ensure that when this day came, he'd have not just a job but a career waiting. The offer's open. Director of Practical Engineering. You'll lead a team developing technologies that actually work instead of just testing well in simulations. You'll have budget, freedom, and responsibility to ensure we build things that solve real problems for real people. I won't disappoint you. I know you won't, but that's not why I'm hiring you. Robert glanced at the crowds of graduates, all walking into futures shaped by privilege and access and opportunities that Alex had earned rather than inherited. I'm hiring you because you understand something most engineers never learn, that the best solution is the one that works with the resources available, not the one that requires perfect conditions. Alex's mother approached, moving with the same quiet dignity her husband had possessed. She took Robert's hands in both of hers. Thank you, she said in heavily accented English. For everything. For seeing him. For believing. He earned every bit of it, Robert replied. Your husband left him the tools. You gave him the strength to use them. I just provided opportunity. You provided hope, she corrected. When we had none. The ceremony dispersed. Families took photos. Plans were made for celebrations. Robert found himself alone with Alex for a moment, both standing at the edge of the crowd, watching futures begin. You know what the hardest part was? Alex asked quietly. What? Forgiving myself for being ashamed. For all those months I sat silent because I thought being invisible was safer than being judged. I wasted so much time hiding what made me valuable. You were grieving, Robert said. And young. And scared. That's not weakness. That's human. Dad would have told me to speak up anyway. Maybe. But he also would have understood why you didn't. Robert paused. The letter he left you. Do you still have it? Always. Alex pulled out his wallet, removed the folded paper, more fragile now from years of handling, but still intact. I read it whenever I doubt myself. Whenever I forget that skill matters more than background. Whenever I start to think that where I came from defines where I can go. Robert looked at the worn creases, the careful handwriting, the father's love condensed into words that had carried his son through 4 years of challenges. He'd be proud, not just of what you've accomplished, but of who you've become. I hope so. Alex refolded the letter carefully. I'm starting a scholarship fund. For kids like me. First generation. Immigrants. People with skills but without resources. People who need someone to believe in them. That's good work. I'm naming it after him. The Practical Excellence Fund. Because that's what he taught me. That excellence isn't abstract. It's concrete. It's fixing what's broken. It's solving real problems. It's using what you have to help others, rather than hoarding knowledge like wealth. Robert felt something settle in his chest. The satisfaction that comes from seeing someone not just succeed, but understand why success matters beyond personal achievement. How much do you need to get started? I've saved some. But I was hoping you'd partner with me. Not just financially. As a mentor for the students we select. Someone who understands what it means to build something from nothing. I'm in. Robert extended his hand. Not the handshake of employer and employee, but of partners. Equals. People who understood that the best way to honor the gifts they'd been given was to ensure others received them too. They shook. Around them, graduates celebrated. Futures unfolded. And in the space between past and present, 2 people who'd started as strangers connected by midnight circumstance had become something more important. Proof that recognition mattered, that opportunity transformed lives, that dignity extended was dignity multiplied. 1 year later, Robert stood in his garage again, but this time with 5 new interns, all scholarship recipients, all talented, all carrying stories of hardship that had refined their skills rather than broken their spirits. Alex led the training, teaching them not just mechanical principles but the philosophy his father had passed down, that worth came from what you could do, not where you came from. That shame was the enemy of excellence. That hiding gifts dishonored those who'd sacrificed to give them. The program grew. 10 students. 20. 50. Each one selected not for perfect grades or prestigious backgrounds, but for demonstrated skill and untapped potential. Each one mentored by professionals who remembered what it meant to be overlooked. Each one given resources that transformed ability into achievement. Robert watched Alex, now 26, leading a team of 15 engineers, filing patents that would change industries, and felt the satisfaction of investment returned 1,000-fold. Not in money, though the company thrived, but in impact, in lives changed, in cycles broken, in proof that systems could be built to elevate rather than exclude, to recognize rather than overlook, to honor human potential regardless of its packaging. Stories like this spread through industries, shared by those who understood that talent distribution didn't match opportunity distribution, that brilliance existed everywhere, but resources did not. People followed the fund's progress, subscribed to updates about students who'd gone from poverty to prominence, who'd transformed hardship into expertise, who'd refused to let origin determine destination. They checked websites for application information, seeking proof that the world still contained mechanisms for justice, for recognition, for the elevation of those who deserved it. The garage still held expensive cars, but its real value now lay in what it represented, the space where potential met opportunity, where gifts were recognized, where a father's final lesson continued to echo through generations of students who learned that worth wasn't granted by circumstance but earned through dedication, refined through hardship, and multiplied when shared generously with others who needed only chance to prove what they could become. Robert Chen, who'd built an empire from nothing, discovered that his greatest achievement wasn't wealth but the multiplication of human dignity, the recognition that everyone deserved to be seen for what they could do rather than judged for where they'd come from, and that the most profound success wasn't reaching the top, but pulling others up behind you, ensuring that the climb became easier for those who followed, that ladders remained extended, that doors stayed open, that voices once silence found strength to speak, and that gifts once hidden transformed darkness into light for all who possessed the courage to stop hiding and start becoming exactly who they were meant to be. The work continued. The fund grew. And somewhere in the country, another kid with old tools and inherited knowledge waited for someone to recognize that their silence wasn't absence of value but presence of grief, and that recognition, when finally given, could transform not just individual lives but entire futures, one midnight encounter, one act of grace, one extended hand at a time.